With Tony Khan's recent purchase of ROH, there's obviously a lot of talk about what is happening, and truth be told, there's a lot of things we still don't know the answers to. But today we are going to talk about some very interesting changes that could be expected. Also, in addition to that, we are going to talk about a very interesting David Arquette story that was shared on the Insight podcast with Chris Van Vliet. Also, Candace LaRae contract expiring. Very interesting stuff. As always, I keep you updated with everything that's happening in pro wrestling. I give you guys my reaction to the biggest stories, and I'm really excited about this one. If you guys want more, don't forget to subscribe. We're going to talk about Candace LaRae first, because this is a very interesting situation going on with Candace LaRae. Fightful Select dropped a report today reporting that LaRae's contract is still set to expire this spring and has not been renewed or frozen yet. WWE sources weren't sure if a freeze was even able to happen, considering LaRae was away on maternity leave. For those who don't know, Johnny Gargano and Candace LaRae just had a child. Regarding LaRae's status, there's a feeling within WWE that she will not be back in action by the time the contract expires, and there has been no talk of a contract extension. Also, it is believed that LaRae and Gargano are both on good terms with WWE, and officials would like to have them back if at all possible. It was noted that WWE officials did not want to concern LaRae with contract extension talks while she was recovering from the pregnancy, which is really good. Shout out to Fightful Select for this report. Very interesting stuff. Obviously, with Candace LaRae, I'm pretty sure I've said it on my channel. If not, now you know. I'm a big fan of her work. I was really happy to see what her and Johnny Gargano were able to accomplish in WWE, but I feel like there is still so much more that can be accomplished. So if in the event that Candace LaRae does decide to wrestle, obviously I would like to see her really get a prominent spot in WWE. Just based on what we have seen from her so far, I just think she's so talented. I think WWE can really hit a home run with Candace LaRae, whether it's in NXT or the main roster. Obviously, that is entirely up to her. If she chooses to continue wrestling, obviously that becoming a mother and then getting back in the ring, it's one of those things I can't speak on. But I do think if she does make that decision to come back, she would be fantastic. Also, good on WWE, I guess, for not having those conversations about contract extensions or freezing, the contract. Because, we've heard stories of the past where WWE would freeze people's contracts and make them extend if they weren't active, which that's a whole different conversation in its own. I think it's important for WWE to have a good relationship with Johnny Gargano and Candace LaRae. Obviously, AEW is a possibility. If Candace LaRae decides to leave WWE, that is just something to keep in mind. AEW could very well benefit from having Candace LaRae, which, by the way, there could be some interesting callbacks between Candace LaRae and the Young Bucks, which obviously could be pretty damn intriguing on national television. All right, guys, I do want to switch the conversation over to David Arquette. I thought this was so crazy. Very, very interesting stuff. Chris Van Vliet obviously has this amazing podcast. If you guys aren't aware, Insight with Chris Van Vliet, you guys should definitely check it out. I just think some of the conversations he has with people have been phenomenal. But there was a little excerpt that came out. WrestlingInc.com was able to transcribe it, and I was just really amazed by this. But it goes to show you how Warner Media is so involved with AEW as well. So David Arquette says he wanted to help Cody Rhodes land a role in the latest installment in the Scream movie franchise. I was talking to Cody Rhodes about trying to have him in the film, and it was right as all the AEW stuff was coming together, Arquette told Chris Van Vliet. Arquette says he was interested in having a match in AEW while he was working on his 2020 documentary, You Cannot Kill David Arquette, but despite Arquette's interest, a match in AEW never happened. Looking back, he thinks forces inside the TNT network prevented it from happening. That's one thing that was a little upsetting, especially with AEW, because they had all the guys that are in AEW in the movie, and I want to go and just do a match or something at the, to promote the movie, Arquette recalls. They're like, nuh-uh. I think it was TNT though, and they were trying to charge me to wrestle. I was like, oh. Now, obviously, keep in mind, David Arquette, everybody, I want to say in the last 2 years, anybody who talks about David Arquette typically talks about what happened between David Arquette and Nick Gage, right? That is what he's most known for wrestling-wise recently. Otherwise, you know him from winning the WCW World Heavyweight Championship belt. Now, with that being said, I don't know exactly whether or not David Arquette would be good business for AEW. I don't know if it would really make sense for him to, like, if it would benefit AEW by any means to have David Arquette. I'm not sure if AEW would have even allowed it. But he mentions TNT specifically, and I find that to just be a very interesting thing because lately we've been talking about Warner Media. And, you know, there was that report that Fightful had dropped before about the Briscoes not being able to come to AEW because Warner Media was not interested in that signing, obviously due to the past tweets. So, you know, I think there's this thing that's like, people kind of talk about AEW and Warner Media like there's just all of this freedom. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I don't think there's a lot of freedom compared to WWE and USA and Fox. What I believe is that Warner Media truthfully understands that AEW is TV 14, and I think they have a little bit more wiggle room to be a little bit different than WWE in that regard, you know. But as it stands right now, I think Warner Media is just as involved of a partner as Tony Khan is involved with AEW. I think Warner Media cares about the performance of AEW, and they see that AEW is successful, and I'm going to assume that, you know, as long as they continue this great relationship and they're working together with these decisions, I think in the long run, AEW and Warner Media are probably going to be partners for a while. I can see Warner Media continuing to invest with these TV rights. So for those who think that Warner Media is not really, you know, they're not really interested, or maybe they think that Warner Media and as a TV partner, maybe they give AEW too much freedom. That doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, for a while, yes, there were certain things that were acceptable on TV, but Chris Jericho even mentioned at one point that he kind of got in trouble because of the cigar or whatever it was that was on TV. And we talked about that in a previous video. So just food for thought, kind of keep that in mind. There is a lot of freedom and there is a little bit of leg room, but Warner Media is still very much involved in the overall product of AEW. And it's a cool thing that they are, because they allow AEW to be this TV 14 product, which features blood and guts, something that Vince McMahon obviously does not like. All right, guys, I want to switch the conversation to Deonna Purrazzo. Very interesting stuff. Obviously, when you consider AEW just bought ROH, or Tony Khan just bought ROH. Speaking to Muscle Man Malcolm, you guys know who he is. What a great YouTuber. Deonna Purrazzo was talking about who she would like to face, obviously, now that she is the ROH current women's champion. She says that she is unsure of what's to come of her relationship with Ring of Honor now that Tony Khan is at the helm. She would love to defend it against Britt Baker, but there is also a lot of other women in AEW that you know, and obviously I don't know what's to come of my relationship with Ring of Honor and Tony buying Ring of Honor, and I just don't know. There's a lot of unanswered questions for everyone right now, and everything's just a little bit up in the air. But I would love to be a Supercard of Honor if I'm asked to be. I will be there 100% defending my Ring of Honor Women's World Championship belt. But yeah, it's Britt. We've talked about that for years. It feels like now there's such a plethora of women talent that I think really could be showcased better and more. I'd love to wrestle Chris Statlander. I'd love to wrestle Layla Hirsch. I'd love to wrestle Red Velvet. There are so many women there that would be first-time matchups for me and potential dream matches. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this is because as it stands, Deonna Purrazzo is currently Impact. She is currently signed to Impact. Now, the door between Impact and AEW is not necessarily closed, but we do know after Christian lost the World Championship, the relationship, while the door is not closed, it hasn't really been ongoing. Now, nobody knows exactly what Tony Khan plans to do with ROH. There's obviously these rumblings that we've talked about in the past with it being a developmental system, but I don't think developmental is necessarily the right way to dictate this or to dictate the future for AEW, because I don't think it's going to be the thing that dictates the future for AEW, And the reason why I bring that up is because with Tony Khan buying ROH, a lot of people have to keep in mind that this is going to be a major change, right? Deonna Purrazzo, do you strip her of the championship belt? Do you have championship belts? Do you treat this exactly the way NXT is treated, in the sense that there's a world champion, a mid-card champion, and all of these different things? Because obviously AEW, they have their own title belts. It's a very, very weird situation. And when you consider that Deonna Purrazzo at this point is somebody who has been on TV multiple times in WWE and Impact Wrestling, she's not necessarily a wrestler that I would put in developmental. This is a big change for AEW, and the way that they move around and maneuver around this decision will be very interesting to see what they do. And I really want people to understand that when you look at the overall scale of Tony buying ROH, I want you guys to know that all this really means for fans is we're going to see a lot of great matchups, and we're going to see a lot of big things happen overall for AEW. It's going to change some things for AEW because we do know that main roster wrestlers will also be on ROH, but how they do this talent share, how they put together these list of wrestlers and matches for people at this point that may have already been on the main roster could be very interesting. And I think that's why you need to look at the differences between WWE, recruiting college athletes and sports athletes, whereas AEW is not necessarily doing that. So very, very interesting stuff. I'm excited to see what happens. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you next time.
Yourself